Heavenly Father, we just thank you. Thank you so much for life and just bringing us together and giving us a platform to spread the amazing work that you do. Father, it's just amazing to see you work through your children right now, and we know that you have a purpose for each and every one of us. And I just ask that you show everyone that's watching how incredibly talented they are, and to use the purpose that you have given them. Father, we thank you for Juan. We thank you for Juan and what he's doing. We thank you for giving him this chance to come on and speak. Um, Most of all, Father, just bring healing to a country and a world that is so confused and divided. Just remind everyone that you have this figured out. You have won this war. We know you win in the end, and the enemy is completely defeated. He's hanging on by a very, very thin thread. And just give supernatural healing to anyone that's battling any kind of illness or depression, anxiety. Just lay a hand on them and let them know that you are the ultimate healer. We thank you for sending your son, Jesus Christ, to be our Savior. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, so I know you're traveling a lot, man.
Yeah. Quite a bit. People have no idea. In fact, I'm going to change sides of the planet twice over the next few weeks. So there's a lot in play. A lot of lives on the line too. While we're doing this stuff with the immigration things here in America, there's still huge wars going on. Sudan, Ukraine, Central Africa, and none of that has really abated. Just so people have it in their mind, you have arguably about 2.5 million people dead in the Ukraine situation in the last 2.5, 3 years. You have something close to 3 million people dead in Sudan in the fight there in the last 2 years. You have something approaching 10 million people dead in the Congo in the last 5-6 years. Think of World War II and all of the death across Europe in that World War II area, something around 20 million total. You think of the Germans and the death camps and all that, but you had other civilian injuries, military injuries, stuff into Russia. Unbelievable battle that, for Russia, millions and millions and millions dead in that battle with Germany. But with all of that, the Congo, a country about the size of Texas times 3. So think of a place 3 times the size of Texas, and then they lose 10 million people in this relatively short period of time. If you want to go back through all the wars in that area there in the Congo, back to their failed state when they came into being back in early 60s, it's probably closer to 25 million. So with the things going on in America right now, this battle over immigration, all the political stuff, etc., on the planet, a lot of those dramas that are happening are even far worse than anything happening here in America, and they continue to happen. They're not getting stopped or abated. As a Christian, the one thing I would remind people within this audience, Congo, with 10 million dead, over 90% of the population is Catholic or Protestant. They're a Christian nation. How many people in this audience as Christians are even aware of this war against Christians? Go to Nigeria. There is a fight in Nigeria to wipe out and destroy all Christians. And they've killed millions there over the last couple decades. Huge fight. So as Christians, this is happening on our watch in the world. And as a church, we can't be disconnected from this, unaware of this, and allow it to happen on our watch. The people that are being killed are women and children, babies, you know, on our watch, and God's watching us. The scripture that applies here, Revelations. Remember the message to the churches? And the Spirit says, I know your works.
Yep.
That should be amongst the scariest thoughts of all. God knows our works. And this
He
is
sees it all. He sees it all.
You know?
Yeah. So can I interrupt you real quick? This was obviously, something you brought up to me last night on your text. And, I am heavily on social media trying to obviously, dig and find research and stuff. And I'm just mind blown that I haven't seen, obviously we've seen stuff with Ukraine. We've seen stuff with these other countries. But when you said Africa, there's nothing.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
The president of Africa, of Congo, was slated to come over to the end of this week. The ambassador from the Congo, it's actually called Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. He spoke before the UN last week, and they actually got a seat on the Security Council at the UN for the people of Congo. And so in the UN Security Council side of things, trying to be able to bring stuff to the fore to discuss it, that's going to help them to be able to explain the situation in Africa. Millions and millions and millions dead. Rwanda, like 1.5 million people.
So what is going on? What is going on, Juan? Like what, is it just genocide? I mean,
well, in the current situation, for example, with Congo and Rwanda, there's about a dozen countries that are involved in the Congo. Everybody's there to get a piece of the pie. And the reason is the Congo is the richest country in Africa with mineral wealth. The people of the Congo are arguably the richest people on planet Earth per capita, period. The problem is it's all under their feet. And the infrastructure is not stable enough to go in and pull those minerals out to benefit the people. So it's been kind of a free-for-all. There's about a dozen countries that are involved there. At the head of all of those countries is arguably Iran and China. And so they're running the insurgencies. They're working the business deals behind the scenes to get the money in there, to get the people in, to go take areas of the Congo and then get some of the mineral wealth out. And China's been the beneficiary of a lot of the chaos there and has been for quite a while, especially certain rare elements. Not necessarily rare earths, but other materials that are rare in other parts of the world that are used in electronics, etc. So it's almost like it's a curse. They have this amazing wealth, but it's, all the robbers want to show up, Dillinger, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Yeah, why are they robbing the Congo? Because that's where the, valuable resources are. And these people were in the way. In fact, it's a genocide. These people are in the way. The greatest victims of all, in my opinion, in the Congo, for example, are the pygmies. Literally, like it said, pygmies, they're smaller people. And the pygmy tribes, they live in trees. They haven't been westernized. They're fairly simple people. They don't have a political class. There's no pygmies running for office. They don't have a business class. They're fairly feral. They were nomadic. And they haven't entered the 20th century, 21st century,
Gotcha.
really effectively. But they're still humans.
Yeah.
Some of the other tribes there in Africa consider them less than human, and they consider literally their flesh to be tasty meat. So they're hunted down like animals and literally slaved to death for the invading groups and raped to death and then eaten.
Wow.
It's one of the most horrible, egregious things. They're beautiful people, and in fact, they do believe in God. They actually are do believe in Christ as Savior. They're just a very simple people. They have to be protected. And in this whole thing, they have property that's been put in a couple people's names to cordon off for them to be safe in. But they're still constantly invaded and kidnapped, enslaved, and everything else. So there's some work to be done there, as much or more so than any other group in the Congo. But again, you got 10 million people dead, mostly in eastern Congo.
What time span did you say that? The 10 million within?
Arguably in the last 5-6 years.
Wow.
It's hard to get exact numbers. China's been supporting ISIS. Iran's been supporting ISIS and M23, supposedly these civil war guerrilla groups inside of the Congo, but they're really being run out of other countries, primarily Rwanda, and going in and stealing the mineral wealth and shipping it off to China. So one of the things that's going to come as a result of all of this, and with America, I believe, starting with the churches.
Sorry, starting with the churches, you said? Oh, did we lose Juan? Oh, there he is.
No, I apologize. I had an incoming call.
Oh, you're okay.
I apologize on that. StreamYard doesn't let me block the calls, so I just have to, send them away when they get there.
So you said starting with the churches.
But yeah, I think the churches, see, if you do what's got to be done there in Central Africa, starting with the politicians or starting with the corporates to go extract the mineral wealth, I think you start in the wrong place. It's a moral war. You have to engage the West to decide that they're not going to allow this kind of genocide in the world in this modern era on our watch. And so China is funding this takeover of Eastern Congo. And in fact, when the president of the Congo reached out to President Trump a couple of months ago and said, you can have all the mineral wealth, just come help us. They were, the political class and business class were sending their families out of Congo to other places in the world for safety. They were beginning to fly the coop out of Kinshasa. Kinshasa is the capital of Congo, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And they were getting ready to be overrun. Those that would remain would have been, killed off, tried, sent into prison forever, had the coup to overtake Kinshasa been able to be completed, and they were in threat of being overrun. When the president reached out, Tshisekedi reached out to President Trump, it was a Hail Mary, if you will, and Trump responded and said that all the countries around there needed to respect the Congolese borders. that kind of threw a monkey wrench in there, and some of the countries, starting with Uganda next door, uh, began to back off. They were all seeing this failed state of DRC collapsing. They were all going to get their rib out of this, their piece of land that they were going to control out of this. When Trump, implied that we were going to come in and step in potentially, that slowed everybody down. The work is still on, though, and I think that, the reality is there's an amazing number of church pastors, priests across the Congo, especially over in Goma and some of the areas that were completely overrun by the communist Marxists, that are looking for help and assistance. They need supplies and support. There's food in Kinshasa, but there's not the military capability to get that into those areas where it's needed. And the killing's going on right now. Hasn't slowed down really at all since Trump made his announcement. So there's going to have to be some kind of an effort to get in there to let the bad guys know that what they've been getting away with, they're not going to continue to get away with, and then get some support and relief, stabilize the area. Probably through the only real network that exists, which is the churches. It's just little gangland fiefdoms. You got to pay off the warlord of that neighborhood before you can get anything past him and his people to help the people in that neighborhood. It's just the way the system is developed. It's very corrupt because the government isn't strong enough there to operate. So mobsters operate, and it's going to be real work. But I think you could try to do it from the political side or the military side. It will fail. If you do it from the church side with the support and protection of the military and the political, we can start building it back out, stabilize the region. Even though there's a lot of people who want to get in there and make a bunch of money, I don't think that's happening anytime soon in reality. So who's going to throw money in there? Well, if it comes from politicians, they make political decisions that may not be the best for the people. I think coming in through the churches, to help stabilize that area with the protection of military. The Congolese people don't need American troops on the ground in Congo. They're not asking for that. They do need some help on the technical side, the surveillance systems and monitoring systems as they move the other groups out, and then the political side, State Department side, if you will, to go have the conversations with the leaders of these nearby countries to make sure that they Budinsky outski and get the hell out. And then if they're supporting any of these terrorist groups, the terrorists that won't leave, you know what? We got a missile with your name on it.
Amen.
It's very personal. Okay. We had a warlord over in Somalia that was making threats to the West early on after Trump came in. Supposedly for the last 4 years, we couldn't find this guy who was literally leading operations that were killing thousands of people. And so Trump came in. He asked for priorities. What do we got to do to start stabilizing this? And even knowing what was going on over next door in the Congo, they said, well, this guy's a bad guy. We had him tracked down in a matter of hours, exactly to his hidey hole in Somalia. Our ambassadors contacted the Somali ambassadors. The president had a little conversation with them. Hey, this guy's holed up in your country. You got a problem with us dealing with it? I know it might be a little hard for you guys, but we think we can take care of it pretty quickly. Would you mind if we sent a bomb down his hidey hole? And the president in Somalia says, of course, no, Mr. President, please do it. Help us. And within 4 hours after that phone call, kaboom, and that little warlord was gone along with all of his people in their hidey hole. You know, they're having a conversation with the devil himself about, you know, apartments and housing in hell. That's the kind of thing that we'll have to do in Congo potentially, because these are terrorist groups. M23 and ISIS are terrorist groups. Their funding is coming from outside of the Congo. They have objectives to support a Chinese position takeover of those areas for their benefit through their proxies and Iran. And so they are legitimate targets in an anti-terrorism campaign. You know, we're pretty good. We can deal with that pretty quickly and stop the killing, the murder, the death there. And then we can start to figure out how in the world are we going to stabilize this so people, you know, for example, I don't know, 2 months ago, you had 70 people. They're living in what they call a church. It was a small building that they were refugees there in outskirts of Goma, doing what they could to survive and working together to survive. So they're all living in church and knock on the door middle of the night, and the terrorists tell them, you have to be quiet. We're evacuating you. You got to leave the church, and we're going to get you to a safe place. To get them all out in the street. And then they started beheading people, beheading parents in front of their children. Killed all 7 of them right there. They have to be demonstrative because that's where the terrorism comes from. It scares everybody else. What they want to do, they wanted everybody else to move themselves out of the area. So they're pushing the line. Pushing the line. If you don't want to be victim like them, you got to move. You got to go away. And they even took over a tin mine in the area that was owned and operated by a U.S. Group, and stole all the goods out of the tin mine. Some of the other minerals, where to go? It went to China. So, you know, who's benefiting, you know, in the course of all this stuff? So once the word came down that we were going to get involved with Trump, with what he said, there was room to push that back a bit, and they've withdrawn a bit. And there was diplomatic stuff done into Rwanda and like that. We're going to have to increase that on steroids. But that's kind of this war in plain sight while you're busy watching the riots on TV in California and Chicago, which are,
say that again. Sorry, I couldn't. You broke up a little bit.
Well, while you're watching this stuff on the riots here in the U.S. and saying, well, it doesn't matter to me what's going on in Africa. As a Christian, another 1,000 people die. That are fellow believers in the faith. Is that acceptable? I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to be aware of some of these issues and push back, try to deal with it, and have some distractions domestically here in the country in the way we operate as a people.
So if you don't mind real quick, a lot of, again, I know you don't know me very well. And, you know, this whole, we talked on the phone with Shemaine, and I kind of told you my story and stuff. And, you know, how 7 years ago, I was divinely introduced to Q and the operation. And a lot of my followers, I always say that Jesus sat with sinners. So I'm always over, and I'm not calling anyone sinners here, but, you know, I was on Instagram and stuff, and, you know, a lot of people have only been on X. So a lot of the people here, being Instagram, Facebook, you know, there's a huge division among news with these platforms, especially the meta ones, et cetera. But a lot of people aren't familiar, I guess, with your background. You know, I was going to let you kind of, I guess, you know, deep dive, or not deep dive, but kind of explain, you know, what exactly, I guess, you do or you are doing, and, you know, how you kind of got into all this. That way people have a better understanding, because your stuff is amazing, man. Like your book, The Kid by the Side of the Road. There's so much stuff that I talk about. And I've been trying to, you know, put out there in regards to this country, you know, living like pretty much under 2 constitutions and the whole Federal Reserve system. And people need to understand that we're truly in a spiritual battle. I mean, this is literally evil versus good, Satan versus, you know, God. And, you know, looking at what you just said, it's happening on a mass level, and we can control, what we can control. I would say we need to pray for obviously those people over there and what's happening. And I know that means a lot to you right now, but you know, everything is tied together. That's what I tried to tell people on my show last night. I was saying that, how if America falls, everybody falls. Like, we are all, besides the continuity of government and stuff, the operation, it seems like all the countries are, controlled by these elites, right?
Well, let me say this without getting too bogged down. The backstory is I was one of the people that helped take down the Soviet Union
Yeah.
in the Cold War era under Reagan, um, with the takedown of the ruble. And the context was that Reagan came in, wanted to take out to end the Cold War and
Mhm.
take down the evil empire. Bleeding life and energy in America, rather than just continue with this Cold War, this perpetual Cold War that's been going on at that time for 30, 40 years.
Mhm.
He came in and said, we're going to just put an end to it. And so
You talking about Reagan?
we
Sorry, you kind of
went
broke
to
up there.
war. Yeah, during Reagan. Yeah, during Reagan. So we
Okay.
started that with taking down the energy prices below a level where oil and gas could be sold out of the Soviet Union for profit. They were selling oil and gas and funding their war machine across the world. Central America, the drug wars, and both Russia and China were involved in the drug wars. That's why we got involved in Nicaragua. They were using Nicaragua as a base to run the drug operations into America and finance their revolutions. The part of it that most people never heard was Cuba's involvement in that, very directly involved with the Soviet Union
Did you say
in
Q?
Cuba.
Oh, Cuba. Cuba. Okay. Sorry, I
Yeah,
thought you said Q.
that's right. That's right. And then you had China with the Shining Path guerrillas in Western states in South America. Uh, China, by the way, with Shining Path, the brutality, the grotesqueness of the way that they terrorized populations is hard to even discuss in decent audiences. Um, it's their brutality was inconceivable. I don't want people to have nightmares tonight.
So that's what
But
really got you. And by the way, guys, in the comments, everyone's like, you need to talk about what's going on. We're gonna get to this weekend. We'll
yeah,
get there in a second. But I love your story, man. Like, taking out the Soviet Union, you've obviously seen a lot. And we had a great discussion over the phone not long ago. But um, so yeah, going back, obviously you've been in these I guess operations, whatever. And how is it? How did you find Q? Or looking at your book and stuff, how far back was that? Like how long? Because people think it just like came out of nowhere in 2017. That's it.
well, I mean, I've been doing interviews, not really interviews, but people like Rush, uh,
Hmm.
Reagan, uh, Art Bell, they're all friends. And in the background for decades, all the way back to the tail end of the 80s, early 90s, uh, I'd get a call, hey, can you explain this to me? Can you explain that to me? Or how does this fit in this context? And so I had been there as a friend in those things. I um, did get asked if I'd go over to Arkansas during uh, as Clinton was coming into office because there was carryover from work I'd done in South America before that. And so I was there helping to bleed out some of the documents there during Whitewater. Uh, and for quite a while. And then as things have evolved over time, um, trying to help people to understand the backstory and what was going on in the world. from an intelligence standpoint and geopolitical.
So now, are you military? Sorry to interrupt you. Were you, or are you military? Are you like, I know you had some backgrounds with like, the surveillance stuff, right?
Well, I tease, Robert David Steele, who was passed away a few years ago. I tease him all the time, and other of my friends similarly. He was CIA, and I tease him that no, you were a file clerk. No, I was a CIA officer. No, you weren't. You were a file clerk. All the real work is done by assets, and because the officers, they go find the stuff that got hidden under the bridge.
Yeah.
They might work the guy a little bit to get it done.
Yeah.
The real work is done by assets and that are off ledger, and their ability to function is different than the people that are in officer positions. So, the real work isn't done by it's done by a different class of people. So
I always say there's a lot of people.
Let me just come forward. You got people that are concerned about the riots, the immigration, what's going to happen across the country, and blah blah blah.
Yep.
I guess part of the reason why I want to mention some of these other things is what's the context. I was going through some stuff from Harvard Business School on their curriculum with a friend who's a graduate of Harvard Business School. And one of the things that they tell you in the prelude to beginning your classes is in breaking up the stuff that you're going to learn over the course of your getting your degree is how nothing is isolated. You don't look at the trade agreements between countries just with that country's own situation, culture, entrepreneurs, businesses, politics, etc. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into how a country conducts its trade policy. But then beyond just that country, there's kind of a soup of all the other countries, and there's trade-offs. And so you can't look at any of that in an isolated way. There's some interrelation between how things end up working out that's a blend of all of these different forces in play, a yin-yang, push-pull kind of a thing. And you make a change in one country, how does it affect the balance with the other countries? So right. In this immigration thing, for example, my Uber driver night before last, he came here from the Sudan. He came here 11 years ago. He came legally and has become a U.S. citizen. It took quite a while, but why did he do that? Because he didn't want to be dead in the wars in Sudan. And his whole family banded together to help him to get a toehold here. He sends about half of his money that he makes back home to help the rest of the family. That's where he honors the family because they're the ones that got him here. He's a survivor. 3 million people dead in Sudan in the last 2 years.
And what's, not to interrupt you, but yeah, like you just said, that there's people that really are leaving their country for a valid reason, and they're going through the process that we have. I mean, I am mind blown that people have the audacity to think that there's like two sides of what's happening in America right now. There's not two sides. You have ignorant, illegal people who are a lot of them being paid, obviously, through funding, who are causing chaos, not protest. And then you have the cops, and you have federal agents, and you have military who is protecting the homeland with, well, hopefully most of them are with their oath. But for some reason, there's this narrative on social media. It's, good, or, like MAGA people versus illegals. And it's like, you come here with due process and we're all open arms, but you can't come illegally into America. It doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work for different reasons than a lot of people realize. When people come here um, through the side door, the back door, and uh, by the way, the trauma that they go to, the chaos that they go to. Imagine most all, almost without exception, of the women and young girls coming into the United States across the border with Mexico, from wherever they're coming from, are raped numerous times, even young children.
It's horrific.
So they get here along this horrid path. And then, by the way, the numbers that get over the border into the U.S. are, depending on which group you're dealing with and talking with, they're only they're reduced by 20 to 30% of the people coming here trying to get over the border die one way or another before they get to the U.S. And they get here through this blood sacrifice, if you will, to finally get here. And then when they do get here, with the people that are running them, you know, they have a cell phone, they have communications, and their relatives back home have communications also. The relatives back home have to pay a protection fee. It's a racket. Kids get here after being raped, many of them killed. After they get here, they have to make a certain amount of money and send it back home so their relatives can pay off the local warlords and be safe. And if they don't make their payments, you know, the kids back home, they're raped. They lose a finger or a hand. They get disappeared. And the rest of the family becomes a lot more animated. You got to get us some money. You got to get us some money. And remember, too, the prisons were emptied in Venezuela. The prisons were emptied in all of these countries, El Salvador and other places, and those were all sent here to America. Look at where this supposed riot thing started in L.A. They had arrested about 20 people. Yeah, look at the 20 people that they arrested, and ICE put it out. They're murderers, rapists, robbery. They're warlords. They are the worst of the worst. ICE wasn't just going after grandma and her knitting basket. They were going after true monsters that were released on the streets of America. You know, until you've been conned by a real con man, or until you've been the victim of, you know, someone that's truly evil, you can be head down and feeding, relaxed, and just going on with life. And then once you've been victimized by something like that, it changes your whole outlook on the world, your ability to function. I had a very well-known person in the political world down in Texas several years ago. She had her 16-year-old daughter with her. They had gone to a very famous mall down in Texas called the Galleria. It was, you know, near closing, and they were returning to their car. And the mother at one point had just noticed something, and she thought, well, that just looks strange, because they'd been in a couple different stores, and a woman had been in the same stores they were, and it seemed like she was kind of noticing them. And she thought, do I know her? I don't remember her from anywhere. But she just thought, well, that was kind of odd. And as they're walking back out to the car, she saw the same woman on her phone standing out by the parking garage where they were walking back to their car. And then she saw some men that were walking from another area nearby. And she realized where her car was parked was kind of, because when they arrived and stuff and all the parking was pretty much taken up, was in kind of a blocked out kind of a spot. And she turned on her heels and went right back to the mall even where the doors were locked, and kind of beat on the door till a worker got to it and wanted to go back in. Uh, uh, and she was able to get back in the mall and explain that she was concerned about this. They went back on the security cameras and looked at the people that she was pointing out, and they had seen them when they pulled into the parking garage earlier, and you could see them pointing at the vehicle with them arriving. They'd seen the mom and the young daughter there, and they were going to kidnap that daughter, probably kill the mom. And she'd have disappeared. And we have reports like this that have happened before and since. But that group, because she was very politically connected, they tracked that group down and decided that was a cartel gang that was kidnapping girls and taking them back to Mexico.
So while you're talking about tracking, actually, I'm just gonna. Man, I'm telling you, you and I, we could talk for years. So right now the big thing is all this stuff coming out with Palantir AI, and I'm just going to tell you what I believe, and you obviously tell me if I'm wrong, or also how you feel. But looking at the Q operation, I think right now you are phenomenal with Q, and people who don't understand Q, I can't imagine what the world looks like. But we talk about this, and I think the big thing now is kind of try to help people understand the operation that has been going on for a long time. But I firmly believe that in a very broad spectrum, everything the cabal, I'll say cabal deep state, had planned to use on us with their 16-year plan or their whatever agenda. I believe the white hats, the good guys, kind of took everything and flipped it. And just a prime example, like cryptocurrency was created a long time ago, and I believe it was created to be centralized by the, to make a one world currency. But
well, it was a DARPA operation that was coming somewhere. We just wanted to own the beginning of it. So the whole narrative is based on a DARPA operation. It's similar to Facebook. That was a DARPA operation. Real
quick. So on that note, exactly what I'm getting to. If you go, like I tell people with Palantir, go on the Q board and you go back to that post where we were told DARPA, or LifeLog, and then became Facebook. And you look at Palantir, and it looks scary to people that don't understand the white hats, and the military are in full control, because people think all of a sudden now we're, being tracked, even though we've been tracked for forever through Facebook and stuff like that. I just believe that, all these things were kind of taken, obviously from the white hats and flipped to, I would say good, or, taken away. But like Palantir, I feel like that's being used to maybe track the illegal immigrants. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's a number of AI operations going on around the country. In fact, the reason that Twitter became X is because we exposed the AI side of those accounts. And that was done at the 1-year anniversary of January 6th, by the way, to stop a media program.
Oh, wow.
That was intended. So there's a lot of angles to that'll come out over time. But let me go back a little bit. You asked me about the Q operation.
Please,
you have to think bigger than even just since Trump had come into office back in 2017. There has been pushback going all the way back to the end of World War II. And the way that America was being captured, the creation of the Air Force, the creation of the CIA, the secret handshake groups that were taking control of the world, the creation of the UN. Remember, the UN was a Rockefeller operation. Kids today have no clue. Most people don't remember this. The Rockefeller brothers worked together. The League of Nations, back to World War I, hadn't quite worked right. And that was really a Eurocentric operation out of England. they came in to fix the problem and created the UN operation. The meetings were happening while World War II was still going on. San Francisco and New York looking for a place to seat this. And by the way, the funding for that was from the Lucis Trust. That whole crowd, and building the UN building on the site of a slaughterhouse. Nelson Rockefeller gave that property, bought it, and then gave it to the UN.
And you're going back how far when you say this? So you're going back.
Well, this is back to the end of World War II, into the late 40s, and of course the whole North-South Korea thing. When we got into the Korean conflict, it was a policing operation. What was the point? Why was Truman running this thing the way he was? It was to give, justification for the UN as this policing agency for the world, and to show how the UN could, stop war by the way we managed the problem in North-South Korea. That was why they were Truman was so pissed off when MacArthur, who was a hero from World War II, when Japan surrendered, he broke the sword of the emperor. And then they worked with Japan to reorient the way that they thought and worked as a society, without shaming them. They gave room, and MacArthur led that, to save face and enter the modern era as friends, not just defeated enemies. And MacArthur, the interesting thing, just for people that really want to go into this deeper, MacArthur did something different than what happened in the mainland U.S. At the end of World War II, we brought Nazis into the U.S. for their technology, for their science understanding, the missiles and, space race stuff that eventually evolved. Also, we brought their intelligence officers and operations and methodologies into.
Yeah, you're going back to when Hitler. You're going back to like when Hitler, and then this is when the CIA, like we got all these different German scientists and stuff, right? And
right. Well, at the end of World War II, our intelligence operations were called OSS. Office of Special Services, and we work closely with MI6, which is their version of what we would call CIA, for example. Foreign intelligence. MI5 is like our FBI, internal intelligence in the British Commonwealth system. And we worked closely with them in taking care of Europe. We brought these Nazis over because they had intel into Russia, Soviet Union, to help us out with some of those operations all over the world. And so they were integrated into the CIA, which was this outgrowth of OSS that President Truman put in by executive order in July of 1947.
Let me ask you this.
Was helping Japan to reorganize in the aftermath of World War II. He also helped them set up their intelligence agencies operations out of Japan across Asia. You had China, you had Southeast Asia, all of these things going on, including all the way down to Indonesia. And in the aftermath of the war, Japan had great intelligence gathering operations, but MacArthur set that up. MacArthur kind of owned the day there. On the U.S. side, with our intelligence agencies domestically, those were created under Truman, with the CIA being created in 47 and the new branch of the service, the Air Force, being created, predominantly in both cases run by secret handshake deals. See, Roosevelt was a 32nd degree Mason. You had to be Mason to get into some of these higher offices and operate. Truman was a 33rd degree Mason. Very rare. People think a lot of people are 33rd. They're not.
What's that?
A lot of people think there's a whole bunch of 33rd degree Masons. No, very, very, very tiny number. And Truman was one of them. That's why he had to be the one in office when the bomb was used. And not a 32nd. These rulers of the world, if you will, within a Albert Pike scenario. And then Truman presided over the creation of the CIA and the Air Force. Well, who got the senior positions? It was all secret handshake club members within those Masonic groups that got the primary places because they're working together. On the other side, in Japan, they weren't really and while they had people that got in, they weren't completely in the same way. So now you go, what happened with MacArthur? When the Korean conflict began, MacArthur was tapped out of China to be the general in charge of running those operations. When MacArthur was put there, he was supposed to provide the information back to Truman. Truman would then clear the information with his UN contacts, a la the Rockefeller brothers, and they would approve any movement of troops, any action, because they didn't really want to win the Korean conflict. They wanted to keep it in check. China was supplying the North Koreans. And you had a kind of a game going on in plain sight. At a certain point in the Korean conflict, MacArthur, realizing every time they passed the intel back to Washington, D.C., they ended up getting countered by the North Koreans with heavy Chinese assistance. A lot of Americans were losing their lives. Under the auspices that they could, in hot pursuit, do things without waiting for Washington to give the approval a few days or a week or two later. MacArthur did the Incheon operation, went up and cut off the supply lines into North Korea for their armaments. And when he didn't wait for Washington approval and did this little thing with his commanders that were his guys, that were that understood, they just wanted to stop the death, the killing. They wanted to win the war, not just have an ongoing policing operation forever. When he did that, he really hurt the Chinese operation, North Korean operation, bypassed the UN control, who was being set up to look like a really cool policing action to save the world, and all future conflicts will go through the UN for management. You'll get more wars.
So you think this is how like Q was?
I'm almost there. Give me a second.
Okay.
I think I'll
I'm just like
for you.
put it all together.
There, but you got to have this background. If you don't have this background, you cannot understand today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm in.
So Truman, because MacArthur proceeded without getting that approval, bypassed the chain of command to stop the fighting, to save lives. Truman fired MacArthur, brought him home supposedly in disgrace, although he had a huge ticker tape parade in New York afterwards. When that happened, he saved a lot of American lives. Moms and wives across the country were, so elated at what MacArthur had done, and they understood there was politics being played with people's lives. Truman fired MacArthur. MacArthur came home. In the years that followed, there was a question, who's going to replace Truman? And Eisenhower and MacArthur, through their proxies, negotiated who would run for president to try and recapture away from this secret handshake crowd the control of America. And the decision was made because of the circumstances with MacArthur and his ties into intelligence in the Asian area and Japanese intelligence, who still loved him. People in Japan just thought MacArthur was, amazing, very honorable. Then Eisenhower, with his knowledge of the Nazi side, including the intrusion into the American military system and intelligence system. And by the way, who was they decided Eisenhower would run for president, MacArthur would appear to fade away. Who was Eisenhower's vice president? Nixon. What was the reason why Nixon was chosen to run on the ticket with Eisenhower? Because behind the scenes, what nobody knew at the time, except in the very highest circles, Nixon personally had to sign off on and do the paperwork on every single Nazi that was brought into the U.S. system. He personally supervised the paperwork as an attorney, U.S. Navy, clearing the Nazi scientists. This one's going to MIT. This one's going to one of the rocket labs. This one's going to work in private industry over here, and this one's going to help with science at this medical thing. He personally knew where all the Nazis were planted in the U.S. system. Why did Eisenhower need him? Because he knew where all the moles were planted in the system that they needed to now go in and weed out and try to get under control. And so this was a much more involved operation than most people have any concept of, because they realized that the U.S. system was being taken over by the secret state, both within the European intelligence circles, the monetary system, the political system, including the Rockefeller operations here in the U.S. And that was the whole thing. When MacArthur went, essentially, for all intents and purposes, silent, the crowds that went with them, if you go back from the current day, all tie back into that original operation, tied into what MacArthur did when he was supposedly fading out of sight.
So do you think that was the formation
That's the origins of Q? That's the origins of Q.
Okay, so perfect. Like, I obviously had no idea. So moving forward, to where we are today, obviously,
let me just say this. Let me help clarify for your audience just a little bit here.
Yeah.
If you look at all the players that are coming against President Trump and have been classically, they're all tied into Rockefeller operations. Remember, Bill Clinton is a hidden Rockefeller. His father was Winthrop Rockefeller. It wasn't Blythe, this Army private that rolled his car over in a ditch and drowned in 6 inches of water, drunk, who his mom supposedly had a date with one time and she got pregnant. It was Nelson, or it was Winthrop Rockefeller. That's who was shadowing and protecting Bill Clinton during his entire time growing up and grooming him for leadership. With all of the various crowds that, were the secret handshake crowds, including into the intelligence agencies, into CIA. And so look at, for example, just going a little bit further forward than that, when the dossier came out against Trump.
Steele dossier?
Yeah, Steele dossier came out of the city of London. That's where they went to get it. Who funded that? Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
And there's a hidden Rockefeller background in her birth history that would take too long to explain right now, but she's another hidden Rockefeller. So they're cousins. Bill and Hillary are cousins. That's why they didn't want to have 3-headed babies. That's why McDougal is the father of Chelsea.
I did not know that.
Law firm. Yeah. So this fight is so much different than most people actually understand today. A lot of the stuff that people were talking about in the 60s and 70s, having to do with the UN and let's get out of the UN and stop this march towards globalism. That was an operation that was an outgrowth on the U.S. side of all the Rockefeller operations. And if you look at where all this USAID money was going and the groups that are funneling it, including the COVID stuff in the medical community, you find the Rockefeller stuff all through it. It's just completely, totally embedded in every aspect of it. So we've been having this fight. For example, where did Brennan become station chief? Saudi Arabia. What's Saudi Arabia really? Well, it's Aramco, this oil behemoth that
Mm-hmm.
controls oil prices out to the world. Why? Because the lowest lift cost of oil through most of the last century was in Saudi Arabia. The oil's up close to the surface. It's easy to get at. So the lift from the pools where the oil's at to the surface, where the refineries are, was the lowest in the world, about $1 a barrel. When you got oil at 30, 40, 60, $100 a barrel, and your lift cost is only $1, you're doing pretty
Yep.
good. With fracked oil up out of Canada, it's in the mid 30s. With oil out of Russia, it was in the mid 20s in the 80s. When we brought the price of oil down to $8, $9 a barrel, in fact, at times it went below. You didn't get paid to take oil. You paid somebody to take your oil for a period of time. Why? Because there was no place to park it. See, oil wells aren't like the faucet. You don't just turn them on and turn them off. It's capillary action. It has to be siphoned through. And if you stop the siphoning action, you stop the flow of the oil to the wellhead. You can't turn it off. You can pinch it back a little, but then you can really begin to damage capillary action. You can't shut it off completely or the well's destroyed.
I used to work out in the oil fields out in West Texas when I lived out there. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, you saw here just recently in fact, during the early parts of COVID, and this is why I repeat it going back to the early 80s with Reagan, there was a point where every bucket, every boat, every container that could hold oil was full of oil because people weren't using it because we were locked down. So oil companies paid people to store oil on their ship at sea, paid people to put it in their tank every month, to take oil and put it somewhere because there wasn't enough places to send it. And the refineries, they had all the oil they could refine because nobody was buying it. So they didn't have any place to store it. So you paid somebody $3, $4, $8, $10 a barrel just to store your oil. When that was full, people are shutting off wells, which destroys a well that you'd have to cap it and re-drill it to get it going again, and at huge expense. That's what happened to the Soviet Union when Reagan brought the price of oil down so radically early in his administration as part of the first attack on Russia, on the Soviet Union, in bringing down oil prices. They couldn't get money from selling oil out of the various areas in southern Russia where they were getting it, and it destroyed their ability to have cash to do stuff. So then they only had armaments to sell because they couldn't sell oil and gas. And we proved that their armaments were cheap stuff and easily defeatable, and then nobody wanted to buy their armaments either. We broke the Soviet Union.
You still there? Oh, you broke up a little bit. You have another call come in?
Sorry. I had an incoming call. I had to send it to space.
Yeah, you're fine.
So
go ahead.
We damaged them in that way, more with the church coming after them, the Pope and like that. People don't realize that, like Walesa and in Poland, like that, it was really a religious war, not just a trade union war.
Well, it sounds like it's,
and then taking down the ruble was the final phase of that to destroy the Soviet Union. Soviet Union doesn't exist. We won World War III. We're now in World War IV. But anyway, go ahead.
Wow. No, I was just going to say, what I always talk about, and I'm watching the comments here, and I know everyone wants to talk about present time. And the problem is when I do my shows, I try to tell everyone we're getting a civics lesson from Trump. People need to understand that, this country was infiltrated. And, I always say that they knew they couldn't come through the borders, as in the deep state cabal, the ruling families. They, over the last, 60, 70, 80 years, slowly installed themselves, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but installed themselves into different parts of government, into different parts of Congress, all the way down to your local authorities, and then they created the Federal Reserve System. You talk about that in your book. I call it the slave system. The Federal Reserve's created. Then you have the three-letter agencies that were created. Now we have all the exposure of all this laundered money that is going to these NGOs and all the corruption within our three-letter agencies. And you just look at the tip of the spear. You go up to the top, and I always say the Roman Empire never fell. It just turned into the Vatican. So it seems like these ruling families, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, whoever, has just created this big cabal criminal syndicate and made hubs like Washington, D.C., which obviously we know was never part of truly America as a republic. Then you have, like you said, London. And so just, getting this civics lesson from Trump, well, looking at these actions that have happened, well, the World Economic Forum, for example, Klaus Schwab just happens to, quote, resign this year. As far as I believe we're getting out of the United Nations, or Trump's trying to get us out of that, and NATO. Things are happening, but no one understands truly, I guess, what happened in the last 70 to 80 years. Does that make sense? Like, with the Federal Reserve System?
Let me help you out here a little bit. Let me just say it this
Please.
way. The issue is this. You have the bloodline families, the 13 royal families, the 12 tribes plus Cain is the way that they would portray it. So the 13 bloodline royal families. And you have a lot of families that they change their names. The imagery they like is that of the Thunderbird,
like the Hunger Games thing.
Right. And so what they do is they are constantly reborn and rebirthed. They self-immolate, they're gone. They don't get out of the egg in the bottom of the nest. After they self-immolate, the new one arises. And so you have a death and rebirth cycle. It's the same families, the same bloodlines, but different names that rise to prominence. Bill Clinton's a hidden Rockefeller. He doesn't go by the Rockefeller name. He, vacations with the family there in Colorado every year. Hasn't for many years, but that's where they did their conclaves for a long time. A hidden Rockefeller in plain sight. But you don't know him by a Rockefeller name. Have many of other families that are similar. George Soros. George Soros is a creation of British MI6. He's not his own man. His son Alexander getting married on Trump's birthday this weekend. They're carrying on a new family name. Yeah, but again, you're looking at a new and improved, reinvented version of these bloodline families under a different name, and yet it's the same family group, and running out through the intelligence agencies across the world.
Correct.
They're descendants of Caesar. They get into ruling and reigning positions, and you're caught up in the Rockefeller Rothschild name, but in reality, they've morphed into other names right in plain sight, and it looks like these are new on the playing field, yet they're the same families. Zuckerberg, where was he created from? Who's he? Arguably one of the richest people on planet Earth, and it was all given to him. He didn't invent Facebook.
No,
it was just given to him. Okay. And the Winklevoss twins, they didn't invent Facebook, but you had a big lawsuit supposedly where they got paid for their work in creating Facebook. Well, if Zuckerberg didn't create it, neither did they. But they got a bunch of money, and what are they into? They're into the crypto world. Both of those are DARPA operations. And by the way, you mentioned Federal Reserve. and
Yes.
the IRS, both created at the same time. Okay, wow, why? Because they're hand in hand. You need the one to go with the other. And what is interesting about both the um, IRS and the Federal Reserve, they're both Puerto Rican corporations. And before
Preach.
it was Puerto Rican corporation, most people don't realize this. The IRS was a Philippines corporation. Courts have found that the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, is a private corporation
Yep.
based out of Puerto Rico. And before that, it was based out of the Philippines. A protectorate of the United States at the time had to be moved to Puerto Rico because we allowed the Philippines their independence. So, what's that all about? Your money,
You broke.
yes, it's Treasury that manage it, but the money, the check, is all going to pay off the debt that we supposedly owe going back to the Brits. So, why are we going to eliminate the IRS? In fact, turn it into the external
Exactly.
revenue system, okay, with
Yep.
tariffs and like that, because we're not going to be somebody's slave anymore. Trump got that going right off the bat. Remember, he had people go out and pull the letters off the building, Internal Revenue Service. Literally
Yep.
had them take the gold letters off the building, okay? There's fights here that are orders of magnitude beyond what most people are thinking about. The immigration thing, you have about 35 million people in the country who are not here legitimately. We're going to reduce that number greatly. And those that want to come back, they have to leave under their own power. If we deport them, they cannot
Yeah.
come back.
Yep.
Okay. So I have one family group that I know the father pretty well. I had no idea that they were here illegally. And he had been doing some car stuff for years. And here I come to find out that he's taking his whole family. There's 21 of them. Closed up all their operations, shut everything down, and all of them moving back. He'd been paying for a farm or a ranch in Mexico that he owned and paying people that were running it for years. They're moving the whole family back to Mexico, and then they'll start the process of coming back in legitimately. In fact, it took him about 60 days to leave, and the whole time he was sweating bullets to get out before they might get picked up, and then they wouldn't be able to come back. He had kids in college and stuff like that, grandkids, the whole schmear. So with that in mind, there's a lot of people that are actually having the same mindset. They're actually supporting, and then they'll begin the process of coming back legally. They want to be citizens and come in through the front door. And this is actually a blessing for them. Stop looking over your shoulder. Let's get it done right. It's going to take some time, but this is the way it's done. The ones that want to fight the system, they'll get deported and they won't get to come back in their lifetime. And that's the way it is. So if they're going to force us to deport them, then they go home, they stay home. It'll be a generation before their children or grandchildren can get the opportunity to come back to the States. But in the meantime, they're going back home with Americanized viewpoints and values, and may very well lead the way to change the direction of the world in their own countries. Those countries that are getting these Americanized people back, they're not happy in this world and they're not happy over in that world, but they're going to be forced to stay there and they'll probably change it. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for everybody for them to have to go back home after having experienced this. And they're not going to want the murderers, the killers, the rapists in their country. They'll throw them back in prison. They emptied all the prisons across these countries and sent them here to America in these communities. When they get back home, they're going to prison. They're not going to just be let run loose on the streets. The people that are back there are not going to want that chaos. So they'll take back their own countries too. It's going to be unfortunately difficult, but ultimately good for the world to.
Well, I don't want to interrupt
process.
you real quick, but I got some things here. You're bringing so much confirmation to me because I've done this. I'm on my own out here. You kind of know my story, but looking back and learning about all this stuff, and I get a lot of heat for it. When I talk about the IRS and, that those topics, stuff like that. But, I tried to tell people that there was a plan. So actually, just real quick on this last thing, on going back to the Federal Reserve, the straw man, the hidden wealth. What do you know, or what's your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think we've had our wealth stolen from us as when we're, given a birth certificate and social security number?
Well, again, the system is so captured, it's so convoluted that at some point we're not going to try to fix somebody else's crooked game. This is where a lot of, I think, even within the Q community, or I'll use this as a Zimbon, the dinar, and things like that. I'm sorry. Let me use this as an example. With the dinar and the Zimbons, a lot of people believe that because of international banking law and the way that certain deals were done under the Bush administration and stuff before and after, the way we went into Iraq, that we have to essentially collapse the world's monetary systems to pay those debts back. But the way I would say it to your listeners, and I've said this for quite a while, but it still gets fought really hard. The reality is you're in a crooked game run by crooked people. And then you're saying that because somebody else brought us to the table and started doing this game as we take command of the ship, that we still have to play that same crooked pirate game and honor all of these crooked debts, okay? For example, in the Congo, Mugabe did a bunch of crooked deals with other countries and businessmen, et cetera, to protect and make money for his own little family. Now you have Tikasheti there in power. The people have been fighting to take back their country. Should they be forced to honor a bunch of crooked deals that were done through graft? Chicago, should we honor the deals that were done with the mob families that ran Chicago behind the scenes? Or do you reset the whole thing and start over? Because you can't unravel and fix everything with the commitments that were there. Not enough money in the whole world. If you go with the dinar Zimbon thing, everybody that has them, they're going to have their own private 747, separate jets for the kids. They're all going to have their 50,000 acre ranch, etc. And then, I got mine. Too bad about you. But I'm going to do refugee centers and help all of the veterans, and I'm going to take care of all the babies and puppies and kittens across the world. It's going to be amazing. The reality is, when you inject the kind of money that they're talking about into the world system, you collapse the world system. When we took down the Soviet Union, we stored huge volumes of the currency there out of the Soviet Union, and just put it in warehouses. And then when we started, and we gave them dollars and Western currencies, to promote. When we flipped the system, we then sent their own currency back to them. Nothing was counterfeited. There was one of the hosts I talked with. He keep on saying it was counterfeited. We never counterfeited the Russian currency once. We just took stuff and bought it in the open market from their generals and politicians that they printed and stored it away and gave them hard currency out of the West. Then when we started sending their currency back into Russia, we collapsed their system. In 4 months, we dropped the value of the ruble by 40%. And we still had 3 times more money than we'd sent into the system to continue that collapse. The ruble went from 40 rubles to the dollar In 4 months, it was 200 rubles to the dollar, headed to 1,000 rubles to the dollar. If Gorbachev hadn't called Bush and said, "Hey, we need some help over here," and Bush says, "Well, the wall's still up. You're going to have to take it down," and that was the beginning. It was 4 hours later after that phone call that the guards started walking away from the wall. The same is the problem for the West here with our currency. People think that they're going to be able to honor all of those agreements. It'll never happen. You collapse the currencies around the world. Same thing with some of the stuff going on in the digital world. Which is better, paper fiat currency or digital fiat?
Yeah. So actually,
the
what?
collapse could be even greater. So the only thing, let me just add this one thing here. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
point is,
Hold on, I lost you. Go back. Pause. Hold on. You're breaking up on us.
Oh, sorry.
Go back a little bit there.
Oh, I hope I'm not losing my battery. Yeah, I may be losing my battery here, so we may have to wrap it up pretty soon. The reality is, all the political promises are so out of reality, be it the promises for retirement or government's going to build everything, what you want to put it into, even the ability to support wars everywhere, including Ukraine. America has been greatly, greatly depleted with our armaments because we've sent it all over to Ukraine. Getting thin on some basic stuff, which means the only way we can respond becomes bigger and bigger weapons that we haven't sent over there. This standoff with Russia is real on the nuclear stuff, where it's going. So with all of that kind of in mind, the political promises of what can be done to take over the world and how we can all live together and be happy, including taking on all the immigrants from all over the world here in the American system, that's being shown to be false. Can't be done. We're going to have to do a reset, which means that we have to move or push all of the people that are here wrong out of the country. If they want to come back, they have to come back lawfully. Allow our system to reset and absorb that population. And we do want the immigrants. We'll bring them back in, provided it's legitimate. And the ones that can't come back in, they'll go change their own world, where they have to go back to.
When you say reset, though, so this is huge for me. And I talked to you with Shemaine about this. I want to definitely touch on this quick, and then I got to ask you about Q before you go to on this 2007. So just on the currency thing, man, as you know, I told you I run a huge 700 member crypto collective group, and I'm starting to have different visions of what is coming, as in I listened to what you told me in regards to go back to JFK and the silver note and silver dollar, and then I see crypto as being a great form of transactions, but I also see other things that it's almost like things will all be in play when it comes to different currencies. You got gold, silver. I don't know about the dollar. You kind of mentioned that in our conversation a while back, but you say reset, like what do you see? How do you see us getting out of this 36 trillion? Obviously we're not going to. Tariffs are doing great. But what do you see this new, currency coming in with crypto and like you said, the silver dollar and stuff like that?
Well, when you're turning around a big ship in tight quarters, we have reefs all around us. We're not out in open water. There's a lot of danger all around us. You have to bring the ship to a near stop, and you throw your side thrusters in, you give it full rudder, you try to turn the thing around. This is a great behemoth, the aircraft carrier America. And so the safest way to do it isn't to try to do a full speed turn. You're going to flip the thing over on its side. You have to bring it to a near halt, turn it around, and get going another direction. The dollar will survive this. It'll do fantastic going out in the future. And we do have a great plan behind the scenes. I actually trained some of the guys that had to go dark several years ago that are on that operation, moving to a metals-backed dollar. But there's a lot of turmoil, risk coming. In fact, when you saw this thing blow up with Russia the other day, where there was these drone attacks on their nuclear arsenal, just under half of their nuclear deterrent, if you will, aircraft that can carry nukes were destroyed. And to replace those aircraft, in a perfect world, would take them a decade, probably take them more than that to replace those aircraft. They also were attacked on their missile systems, the ability to refurbish and maintain their missiles, intermediate range and long range missiles. So a huge percentage of their nuclear arsenal deterrent was just destroyed by Ukraine. Arguably, it wasn't Ukraine, it was NATO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the elites.
Lose it kind of ability. They don't act, they could lose all of their ability to respond. So they're not too excited about just giving a wink and a nod. Okay, that's okay. This was a very serious blow to Russia. That's why when Trump wasn't informed of it by any of the people around him, that was an egregious wrong to the person that represents the people of the United States. It brings us a step closer to a real nuclear exchange.
So real quick on the crypto thing,
mind,
though. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm coming back to the crypto. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say the crypto thing. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'm tying this to the crypto. Here's the way it ties together. When the world was in extremis because of what was going on over this attack on the nuclear arsenal in Russia, you saw something wild happen in the metals and the currencies and the markets. The Bitcoin dropped 10%, and the cryptos across the board dropped similarly. You saw that gold stayed about even or went down a little bit. The only metal that moved up decisively was silver in those couple of days. Now, you look at the crypto with Bitcoin is kind of the benchmark. Okay, let's just call Bitcoin at 110 this exact instant, and silver at 36. It did the breakout of 35, and so it'll go to 50 over probably the remainder of the year pretty decisively, and it could go further than that. How fast is the Bitcoin going to move? I would say to your audience, in the problem.
What's that?
Say that Bitcoin double. Let's say that Bitcoin doubles to 220.
Okay.
Silver to stay apace would have to go to 70, 71, 72. Here's the real with the Bitcoin. You're going to get hit hard on the premiums for getting in or out of the market. And when you do it, you're locked in a crypto world. When the hurricane hit North Carolina, nobody's computers worked. Right. They couldn't even use cash at the store. Nobody wanted the cash. They just wanted, they did take it, but a lot of people were trading in silver. It's smaller increments. Gold coins are harder to trade. Silver's the one that's more ability to move quickly and at modest sums. The silver coin is really the best. When you look years ago, Canada had a bunch of their coinage done, and it's been stored away. And the face value on that coinage is at 200 loonies value to a 1 ounce silver coin. That's still sitting in reserve there. Where do they expect it to go? Now, of course, the Canadian currency is different than the U.S. currency, but they've got a reserve to manage some kind of a breakout within their currency system. Other countries have something similar. The U.S. is in a position to begin to back our currency, and I won't go into the details, but we actually have a great plan. And it's a proper plan. And the guys, I've talked to the guys about it, over 30 years ago. And now it looks like that's what they're going to do. I think it will stabilize America very well within the monetary systems. But before you get there, there's a lot of turmoil. You have to bring this to a near stop. You have to extricate yourself from the Federal Reserve system,
Yes, exactly.
private banker system, and go back to currency run by the Treasury, constitutional money backed by real metal. That process isn't instant. And then the obligations that are owed tied to that, people's retirement, et cetera, is going to have to be worked through so that we don't lose anybody on the way. We still have to maintain, even though we go down to a slow hull speed, you have to maintain momentum to have what we call steerage. Below a certain hull speed, coasting through the water, you can't steer the boat anymore because it's not going anywhere. So you have to keep the ship of state of America moving, but at a lower speed while we turn this around. In the meantime, metals, gold and silver, they are a store of wealth, but they don't make money in the meantime. They don't spin or toil. So what you want to be able to do is to shift into something that has real value. You could say, well, it's real estate or something else that's highly inflated. Is silver highly inflated? No, it's been suppressed. Is gold highly inflated? It's been held back, but not as much as silver. When it slingshots, when the pressure is truly on, and there's more pressure to come, what we just saw the other day is exemplary of where this is going. Silver is the one that will break out. The other ones will lag. It is the one that even the banks, why do you think these huge banks like Chase have unfathomable amounts of real silver that they put on deposit, not notes of promises for silver, not silver contracts, real silver. Every time there's been some pulling back, they've picked up real silver and exchanged it for contracts. When this breakout happens, that's why the price of silver, when you go to look at, buying a silver contract or something, and then you go to actually buy a physical coin, the physical coin is way more than what the price of silver is. Why? Because it has greater value. It's in a minted condition. It's a known weight and value. And and that has value to it. So it goes for significantly more. A perfect silver coins, mint quality, Eagles, they're $100 an ounce. Well, but the price of silver is out there at 36. Excuse me, mint quality, it's way up there. And then go try to get some. Go try to buy any bulk. They're not printing it. Well, it should be. That's what the Constitution says. Okay, well, that's the problem. You're in a system that's broken. So if you're able to find what I call bag silver, which doesn't have any collector value, numismatic in collecting value. It's just the weight of the silver, and it's minted by the U.S. Treasury. When you go buy bag silver, you're just buying it for the raw value of the silver, but it's in a known condition as a coin. And therefore, people recognize it for what its value and weight is and purity and everything else. It's a good way to go. You can do it with dollars because that's a good U.S. currency, but you can do it with loonies out of Canada, and you can do it with some other currencies that still make sense on the value that are pretty well known. So,
well, anyway, I know we are. Yeah, so I know the time is short, but I have to. So the currency thing will work itself out. Right now, let's just fast forward real quick. Obviously, there's chaos going on. I had a great friend of mine ask, why did the first Q drop, come out in 2017? My firm opinion is because that was when really, technology and the internet was speeding up with the creation of social platforms. But not only that.
Well, hold on. Let's be absolutely correct on this.
Okay.
It came out October 28th, 2017.
The first drop?
I think it was the first drop. I think it was like 4:44 p.m. Yeah. If you look from the minute of the first Q drop, It was 7 years, 7 months, 7 days, 7 hours, 7 minutes, I think, if I recall correctly, from
Do
the.
you consider the ones without the Q? So some of these in the first,
No,
remember
the
they didn't
later
have
ones are not valid. Nope. Nope.
the what?
That was a little scam by some folks that wanted to try to capture the operation.
So the first drop is the one. Can you see the screen here?
Yeah.
No.
The first drop was done timed to the 2020 election. Remember, Trump, his first full day in office was January 21st, 2017. So even though he's inaugurated the day before, that was at noon, he didn't get a lot of work done from noon on like he did this time. This time he got to work right off the bat. But when he took office 2017, his first day in office was January 1st. Walked in the office, in the Oval Office at 7 o'clock in the morning on January 21st, 2017. He was 70 years, 7 months, 7 days, and then 7 hours old on planet Earth. That's how long his time had been here. Seven's been a Trump number all the way along, and this operations number. And that first Q drop to the 2020 election was timed precisely. Excuse me, 2024. I was saying 2020.
Real quick,
2024 election. Yeah.
Well, I'm having confusion because which one? Because here's, if you see the board, these don't have Q at the bottom. A lot of the first one that says, Hillary be arrested. A lot of people consider that one the first one on 10.
That was a Q drop. Yep.
That's the first.
That was a Q drop.
One.
Yep.
Okay, because a lot of people came on my show and said since Q did not signature it, these are not valid.
No, they were valid, but there's a method to the madness in all of that, because of course she had FBI and other stuff that was in there, paving the way for those first drops, and it was kind of an evolving system along the way. Remember, it's AI. It's humans augmented by AI to get everything down to the exact second. And even in the numbers to the exact second, every drop has a specific meaning, some more than others in the way that was put out. That's why what appears to be random, some of it later on, you realize, well, that wasn't random. That was done with a certain timing on purpose that becomes apparent later in the game.
So going here to Trump, this is a big thing for my viewers and me. I always say that Trump was selected to be the Jesus is our savior.
Let's say it correctly.
Okay.
Trump was asked and invited. Trump uses the word invited to run. Who actually introduced Trump? The crowd that's doing this. Nixon. Nixon was great friends with Trump. Nixon had gone through all the drama. Nixon, even the setup on Watergate, was done by this insider crowd, this Rockefeller crowd.
That's how
I
Trump
could spend hours on that. I've talked about it previously. So Trump was invited. He was schooled in on this at that time, and agreed to take his role in the broader operation.
So
this is way bigger than most people have a clue.
That's how going back to Trump's early days, because he was friends with JFK Jr. and well, I know they were close at least. And then like you just said, you look at the interviews with Trump, with Oprah about being a president and the country, and when he talks about it, it's such a young, early guy, an early age in life.
Well, in President Trump's first term, over his left shoulder in the Oval Office was a letter from President Pat Nixon and President Nixon's wife. And Pat Nixon wrote to Trump and said, "I hope someday you decide to run for president. I know if you do, you will be a great president." Trump framed that and put it over his left shoulder there in the Oval Office. as a reminder how he got there. Even now, he swears in all of the new members of his administration for their various positions under a huge oil painting of Reagan. He has an understanding of how we got here. Reagan was fighting the machine. Reagan, took down the Soviet Union, ended the Cold War, won World War III, bought us 40 years of relative peace. But the fight goes on. And we're in the continuation of that fight to take out these globalista that want to move us to a Pike dream, a secret handshake dream of a united world after 3 major world wars. Okay, Albert Pike and crew, he wrote more that is the core of the Freemason operation. He wrote Morals and Dogma in green ink. And he said the reason he did that was in honor of the spirit that taught him everything that he needed to know in writing the book Morals and Dogma. Well, why? Because the spirit presented itself in a green form. What's that go back to? Satan, Lucifer, the devil, the green man.
Yeah.
For he hid amongst the green leaves of the tree of the garden.
Yep.
And then in the center of Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, where he talks about taking the world to 3 world wars in order to have a one world government, in the center of the book, he says, let there be no misunderstanding that the God whom we serve is Lucifer. This is a Luciferian dream, a horror, a nightmare that these people seek to bring upon the whole world, even with their Lusitania, starting World War I for the U.S. involvement, with the Lucis Trust being the money behind the foundation of the UN, which isn't stopping wars, it's helping to create them and keep them going. This Luciferian attack on America through all of these various operations, including using the right numbers. Just like the moments and numbers throughout the Q operation are so critical. 17 is the number of victory. It's also the number of reversals and flips. It's a number of captivity to those operating from the occult side. That's why the Q had to be put around President Kennedy's grave to enclose, encapsulate, and enslave that spirit within that flame, within that zone. But the other side of the coin is 17 on the church side. From a divine side, the 17th book of the Bible is the book of Esther, where all the roles were reversed and flipped. 17 is the number of victory. The book of Esther is the 17th book of the Bible. We see 17 over and over and over again having to do with victory. It also has a tie to silver, by the way. And so when you understand that, you see that both sides are competing for ownership of that number and its meaning for their own reasons. And so the fight is on. We can't let them own that number. We're going to flip it on them.
So going back to 17, and I'm going to try to fast forward this up to now. So like I always tell everybody, we've been under continuity of government. There's executive orders. There's plenty of information out there that proves, Trump was, like you said, invited and took this position. Right now, I'm showing that picture of his speech with the military intelligence and the generals behind him. And so go through the last 4 to 8 years, we're getting information that Biden was obviously a clone and an actor, and he was executed maybe in 2020. And then,
by the way, the physical Biden showing up in places was not a robot. But what there is reference to is you have a lot of green screen stuff that was done. For example, Biden, when he was getting onto Air Force One or Marine One, and he's out there and the mic, his hand passes right through the mic. Okay, and some of you remember that, the gray cover over the mic from the reporter. Well, that was all done on a green screen. So you're seeing a computer image of Biden, that's the electronic side, in the various 4 White Houses that are all models that exist in a virtual world. And then the actors portraying Biden, there was 4 of them. So, you've been witnessing a competition behind the scenes. Remember Biden getting on Air Force One and the emblem on the side of the airplane.
Yep.
Air Force One. Okay, so you were watching something. You were given clues all the way along the way that what you were seeing didn't make sense, so that you could do the processing. At the end of the day, the fight that we're in right now, in this continuity of government, you raised it. I'll finish the statement. Has to do with NORAD, North American Command, and the operations out of Cheyenne Mountain with nuclear authorities, the football and all that, versus senior executive service, the shadow government, run behind the scenes by these families all tied into the broader Rockefeller Masonic operations. There's a half dozen of them, so don't get lost in any single one. These are different groups working together to take control of the country. It's not just one group, and also externally across the world. So at the end of the day, even with nuclear command, I'll say this even though a lot of your audience may have already heard me say this before, it's worth a quick refresh. When Biden, or the image of Biden, or the actor Biden, finished the inauguration and went to immediately be spun up as the commander-in-chief, receiving nuclear authority. At the football, he was informed that he was not being given recognized with authority over the nukes, that there was an investigation, a 45-day investigation that was to ensue for the purposes of the handoff from the military side. Trump, when he left D.C. that morning, he was still president commander-in-chief. He left D.C. and the football went with him. He got all the way to Mar-a-Lago and the football was still with him. He was still technically president of the United States and commander. When Biden was sworn in, the president hand off the baton. That was another football that was there. We have several that, they get serviced and like that. And Biden didn't get the codes, didn't get the biscuit. Now, a lot of people have argued over that. I've mentioned a number of times. Immediately afterwards, in the days that followed, Nancy Pelosi did a huge push to say that Congress should have the nuclear codes, that it would be safer with them than it would be with a president that might, lose their mind or something. And she got laughed out of Congress. What we're gonna give the nuclear codes to Congress in an emergency with seconds to spare. They're gonna have a debate over whether or not to use nuclear weapons to defend us. No way. Well, why was that? Because Biden didn't get them. And then the raid at Mar-a-Lago, and even to want Trump arrested and literally body searched, because the biscuit, which has the nuclear codes, that's a handshake. When he pushes the button at the football, nothing happens. All it is it's an agreement. It's a handshake with the guys in Cheyenne Mountain and similar facilities to then go ahead and do the launch. So it's just it's a nuclear agreement handshake. But Trump never handed off the biscuit. Here's the deal. He had to have the biscuit on him all the way to Mar-a-Lago because he was still commander-in-chief and president. When he gets to Mar-a-Lago, who does he give the biscuit to? The new commander-in-chief isn't there. The person that's carrying the football does not have authority to have the biscuit. The commander-in-chief has to have the biscuit on him 24/7 all the time on his physical body or within arm's reach. So there's no giving it to Melania. There's no giving it to Barron. There's no hiding it in the closet for an hour. It
Right.
must be on his physical person or within arm's reach at all times. And he can't give it to anybody to hold on for safekeeping, not the Secret Service, not the guy with the football. So where's Trump supposed to have put it? When they searched Mar-a-Lago, they thought because he was out of town that they might find the biscuit there in some secret hiding place. They wanted to do a body cavity search when he was arrested, the different times, they were hoping to find the biscuit on him. Why? Because they never got the biscuit. People thought it was the Blue Book from Crossfire Hurricane with all of the people involved and the Russia stuff they were looking for at Mar-a-Lago. No, it wasn't. And Trump told you in precise, exacting was last summer during the campaign. He said during the campaign, he said, you think would have left the nuclear codes in the video game drawer of a teenager, referring to Barron, because they searched the whole at Mar-a-Lago. They went through Melania's dresses looking for the biscuit, the launch codes, and they couldn't find it anywhere. Where did Trump put it? When he went, he declared a national emergency March 13th of 2020 with the COVID. March 15th, he went to do a walkthrough at Cheyenne Mountain. They'd upgraded it, improved everything, fixed it all up. He left it at Cheyenne Mountain, the only place on planet Earth that had the authority to have the launch codes, and it was locked away there. So for the remainder of his presidency in 2020, he didn't have the launch codes on him? No, he had them. When Trump left the presidency in early 2021, you'll remember he had a physical exam, and his mental acumen was tested at the same time, and he had perfect memory. Why was that done? Because he memorized the launch codes. When Biden got in, nothing was changed. They were locked in place. No one could change those codes once Trump had locked in place and had declared a national emergency. Nobody over at SES, Senior Executive Service, could change them. Trump has the launch codes. So was Biden the commander in